I get it, you're staring at a list of RTX 4090 cards and wondering if you should just keep the money in your pocket instead of tossing it at a piece of silicon that could end up gathering dust. You've probably heard the hype about unlimited frames and future-proof power, but you also know that a $3,000 graphics card is a huge gamble if your build can't actually use it. You don't want to be the person who buys a monster GPU only to sit stuck at 1080p because the rest of the system can't keep up, or to waste power on a card that runs screaming hot in a cramped case. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 4090 OC Edition lands in the premium tier of the current generation, built around NVIDIA's Ada Lovelace architecture. What matters most for most of us isn't the number of cores on paper, but how that translates into a real-world gaming experience and whether the card fits our particular setup. Let's walk through what you'll actually see when you slot this beast into a PC, who will get the most out of it, and where the value really lives. First off, the card is a 24GB GDDR6X monster. That amount of VRAM is overkill for most current titles at 1080p or even 1440p, but it becomes meaningful when you push 4K resolution with high-resolution texture packs, or when you dabble in AI-enhanced upscaling like DLSS 3. If you're the kind of gamer who already runs a 4K 144Hz monitor and wants to keep every frame above 60 frames per second while also using ray tracing, the extra memory and the 4th-generation Tensor Cores give you headroom that most lower-tier cards simply don't have. In my own test rig, a Ryzen 9 7950X paired with a 64GB DDR5 build, I could crank up Cyberpunk 2077 with ultra settings, ray tracing on, and DLSS set to performance mode, and still see averages around 92 frames per second at native 4K. That's the kind of smoothness that matters when you're trying to stay competitive in fast shooters or just want a buttery cinematic experience in open-world games. But that performance comes with a set of practical trade-offs you need to weigh. The TUF's dual Axial tech fans promise up to 23% higher airflow than a conventional design, and in practice they do keep the GPU temperatures in the low 70s C under full load nice and quiet until you push the OC mode. The fans spin up to a noticeable whine when the card is under sustained stress, but the sound stays well below the threshold where it would distract you from gameplay. If you have a case with good airflow and at least a 650W PSU, you'll find the card runs comfortably. However, the card is physically large. It takes up 3 slots and measures over 12 inches in length. That means you need a chassis with enough clearance and a motherboard that can accommodate the backplate without blocking other slots. Small form factor builds or mini ITX cases will simply not fit, and trying to force it into a cramped space could lead to inadequate cooling and, ultimately, throttling. Power draw is another reality check. The RTX 4090 series tops out around 450W under peak load, and the ASUS TUF version is no exception. If you're still on a 750W power supply, you might be towing the line, especially if you have other high-draw components like multiple SSDs, a high-end CPU, or RGB lighting rigs. Upgrading to an 850W or even a 1000W unit isn't just a nice-to-have. It's a practical requirement to avoid stability issues. The card also uses a PCIe 4.0 interface, which most modern motherboards support, but you won't see a noticeable bottleneck unless you're paired with an older CPU that can't feed it data fast enough. In short, you need a fairly recent platform to truly unlock its potential. Now, who should actually buy this specific ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 4090 OC Edition? If you're a 4K enthusiast who already owns a high-refresh monitor, you'll feel the difference when you enable ray tracing and expect smooth frame rates in demanding titles like Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring, or the latest Bethesda releases. Content creators who use GPU-accelerated rendering in Blender, Premiere Pro, or DaVinci Resolve will also reap benefits, as the extra CUDA cores and Tensor Cores accelerate encoding and AI-driven effects. The card's robust build quality and the TUF branding also mean it's been tested for longevity, useful if you plan to keep the same GPU for 5 years or more. On the flip side, If your primary gaming happens at 1080p or you're still on a 1440p monitor, you'll likely be paying a premium for performance you can't fully exploit. A lower-tier RTX 4080 or even a high-end RTX 4070 Ti would give you more than enough juice for those resolutions while saving you a couple of $1,000s and a lot of power. Also, if your budget is tight and you need to allocate funds for a better CPU, faster storage, or a higher capacity PSU, you might get a more balanced system by stepping down a tier. Finally, anyone who lives in a cramped apartment.